The Lake County Board of Commissioners. Would all those who are willing and able please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Grant us, O Lord, light to our understanding, prudence in our investigating, foresight in our planning, sincerity in our deliberating, the grace to follow truth in our judgment. Help us to be moved in our decision, neither by fear nor by self-interest, and to do our work faithfully. May we respect the authority vested in us, for thou art the source of all authority. And may we use our directives for the common good and for thy honor and glory. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Present.
Commissioner Young.
Here.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Here. We have before us the meeting minutes for May 6, 2021, May 20, 2021, August 26, 2021, and September 2nd, 2021. Do we have a motion to approve same, waiving reading thereof?
So moved. Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes. Okay, this brings us to our first public comment portion. We have with us today a guest. We have our new treasurer, Mike Zern, and I believe, sir, you have some good tidings to report. Would you care to share that with the folks?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank the commissioners. I took office about 2 weeks ago, and the commissioners talked to me, and they talked to me about an account, the surplus funds account, which is about $5 million that the county has had. That has been growing over the last 30 to 40 years of excess payments on property taxes. That was something that I discussed with the chief of staff and the staff the first day I took office, and we have been researching it. In the last 2 weeks, about 65 parcels have been credited back money for overpayment. I had the pleasure yesterday of contacting a homeowner from Menor, and we were able to return a check for $1,083 to her. We have a picture, if that's able to be pulled up. She was so thrilled. This money was from 2018. When I talked to her, she refinanced her house, and it looks like the title company paid the bill, and she also paid the bill at the treasurer's office, so we had a copy of the checks to confirm the overpayment. And she just put windows in, or just ordered windows, and she was so happy, and it was just a great experience. I'm so grateful to the commissioners for bringing this to my attention, and also to the treasurer's staff, because they've been there. This is now something they're going to focus on. So I just wanted to thank everybody.
Excellent. Well done, sir. Commissioner Young, Commissioner Plechnik, anything you want to share?
Mr. President, if I could just say this is the perfect example of a public servant listening and immediately responding to the public's concern. We've heard from many people in public portion about this $5 million some dollar account, which are excess property taxes, folks who've accidentally overpaid. In some cases, these overpayments have been in the county's account for decades. And that our new treasurer, weeks into the job, has already found so many folks and begun this refund process to make sure that the money is in the hands of the people who truly own it, the taxpayers. It's a real commendation of what Treasurer Zern is going to be about in his new office.
Well said. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Young?
I just want to congratulate you on these first steps. Keep that attitude. Just counsel you to keep that attitude, the attitude of take a fresh look at it and use your own discretion. Go with your heart. Go with what you know is right. Explore it and see what you can make happen.
Thank you.
So that's fantastic. Great work. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, and we're still in our first public comment portion. Do we have anyone in the audience wishing to address the board at this time? Mr. Lima.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dave Lima, 7774 Litchfield Drive in Mentor. It has come to our attention that a $48,800 contract was signed April 30th, 2021 between this board and Project Management Consultants, LLC. According to the contract, Jeff Applebaum, a principal in PMC, will assist in the selection of a design professional who will develop a master plan and detailed drawing for a new jail. According to the contract, this is to be completed in 4 months. This contract with PMC is an indication that this board is moving forward very quickly with plans to construct a new jail, and may include a significant increase in capacity of some 180 beds per consultant reports. Mr. Applebaum, in an interview with Cleveland.com, said he actually worked to reduce the size of a new Cuyahoga County jail over the past 2 years. Applebaum, along with justice system experts, helped conduct a review of the jail population to determine how many inmates might be better suited for treatment or alternative programs rather than being housed in the jail after a run-in with police. Such efforts helped the county, again Cuyahoga, open a diversion center earlier this year for individuals with mental health, addiction issues, and people suspected of low-level violent crimes. He went on to say, ideally, that will translate to a long-term reduction in inmates and reduce the size of that jail that could be built. Serious consideration of his comments are warranted, especially when contrasted with K2M's view that the jail population needs will grow by more than 29% by 2039. This, while the Lake County population is projected to grow at less than 1% during that same period. Renovation of the current jail without adding additional beds, along with the use of alternative resources for individuals with mental health, addiction issues, and those charged with low-level nonviolent crimes, remains the only sensible alternative worth pursuing. The public should be an integral part of this discussion through a series of public forums prior to any decision being made. Only then should this plan be presented to the Lake County voter at an upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, do we have anyone else? John, music.
John Music, 45 Coventry Drive. I just want to thank Treasurer Zern for helping this individual. Just remember this, we cannot help 232,000 people without helping the first one first. So it's a start and it's a beginning, and I thank him for doing that. Thank you.
It's very kind of you. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, very good. Moving on to our first agenda item.
Mr. President,
Oh, I'm sorry.
if I may,
Yes, sir.
I might have been asleep up front here, but
what
we
I
had a
missed?
roll call, and I think there's some meeting minutes that were going to be addressed.
Did Jennifer,
The minutes were addressed, but the waiving of the reading.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
We just have to waive the reading. That's all.
oops.
And Mr.
Okay.
President, if I may, I wanted to make sure that everyone in public portion had a chance to speak before any of us jumped in. But I did want to say first, there's no one I enjoy disagreeing more with than David Lima, because Mr. Lima is one of the most thoughtful and considerate speakers in public portion. So it's always a pleasure to disagree because we can have a thoughtful debate. But I will confess that if I were Czar of the Universe, we'd start building a new jail today. I agree with our sheriff. I agree with our local corrections board. I agree with our judges, our public defender, our county prosecutor. all of whom have cast their vote in recommendation of building a new jail facility, a new justice center that will better address the needs of those who are addicted, mentally ill, and who need correction so that they can move forward safely and productively in society. Folks make mistakes. They're still our neighbors, they're still our family, they're still our friends, and we want to have a facility that meets their needs. And I understand that some people have very hopefully looked to the future and said we'll need far less beds and hope, maybe prisons won't even be necessary someday. I would love to live in that world. But where our experience has been in the last half century, that the need has increased exponentially vis-a-vis our population, to make an argument to the contrary, to say that the jail administrator and the sheriff are wrong with their projections of what the needs will be, when they project that there will be a greater need in the future, and there has been a greater need every year on the year with the exception of COVID, and I think we can all agree that 2020's numbers and statistics are not representative of many issues, not just jail population. I think that you bear a heavy burden of proof to say the jail administrator is wrong, the sheriff is wrong, and all the trend lines that we've observed for the last 50 years are suddenly going to change. So I haven't seen anyone offer evidence beyond hope, and I certainly want to be wrong. I'd love to live in a world where jails are unnecessary or that need dramatically reduces. But here and now, we have to be commonsensical. And if our jail administrator, our sheriff, our corrections board say, here's what the need is, and their projections match up with our historical experience, it would take some pretty substantial evidence to the contrary for us to responsibly say, oh, we won't need more beds. In fact, we'll need less. Because let's remember the cost of being wrong. If we refurbish or build or have a facility that's too small, the rough cost of housing inmates today, the going market rate, is about $1 million per year per 25 inmates. So every 25 you're off by is $1 million cost to the taxpayer. And we need to remember that being off by too many could bankrupt the county. And that would not be a responsible place for the budgeting authority to be. I believe that we want to treat our neighbors more humanely, and putting them in a jail that leaks like a sieve, that was built to standards and goals that don't reflect where we are today as a county or a society, I don't think that that's compassionate. I think what's compassionate is to come together and build a better jail, and one that will last longer and be a more affordable option to the taxpayer. You mentioned the K2M study, which projected that renovating the jail would be roughly $30 million, adding an addition would be roughly $20 million, and that doesn't even address the roof, which would be about another $20 million by my best estimate. So you're talking about a $70 million expense to have an equivalent refurbishment or rebuild of the old jail versus building a new one for an estimated cost of $70 to $100 million. Bringing Jeff Applebaum on board, I think, does give us another perspective. And I would love to hear, and I want to hear from Jeff throughout the process. By the way, Mr. Applebaum is a Kirtland attorney. He is a taxpayer here. He cares with the same concern that each of us do as citizens. Are we spending the tax dollars well? Is this what's right for our community? Because he lives here. And he's also an internationally recognized expert on construction and the law. And so I think his perspective will be very valuable going forward. But the goal here is to bring on board a criterion architect who is going to sit down with the judges, the commissioners, the sheriffs, the public, and get a sense of what our needs really are, so that we go from this back pocket number of 70 to 100 million for roughly 500 to 600 beds based on the projections of the sheriff's need, and actually have a concrete proposal that we can discuss. That's what we need to have, because we can't keep debating back pocket numbers. We need to actually have a thorough discussion with exact numbers as to what the needs of the sheriff and the county are, as well as what our budgetary expense would be, could be. And that's what this will take us to. But I make no bones about it. If we were in a world where we could move faster to address this need, I would, because the longer we wait, I'm willing to tell you, I'm willing to lay the money on the table here. The longer we wait, The higher the interest rates will be, the higher the cost of labor will be, the higher the cost of materials will be, and we won't be talking about a refurbishment or a new jail for 70 to 100 million. We're going to be talking about a refurbishment or a new jail for 150, 200 million. Mark my words. And I guarantee you that the same folks in public portion who express legitimate concern that 100 million is too much, well, they're going to say, well, why didn't you build it for 100 now that it's 200 million? Oh my! We could have done it for half the price if only we'd acted. I agree with that concern. I want to preempt that concern. I want to make sure that we give the sheriff and the county what's needed for humane treatment of those who've made mistakes, for safety, for supporting our police, but at the lowest possible cost. And I know we've had this debate many times, but there's no secret that I am eager to support our sheriff's department in this endeavor, and that we should do it as quickly as possible to minimize the cost to the taxpayer and make sure that the folks in the jail across the street are housed more humanely, are given a more thoughtful circumstance that does address their needs. I don't think it's right for us to spend the next 3 or 4 years debating when the cost doubles and let those people languish in a facility that I think anyone here would concede is not up to par. Thank you.
Well, I do feel it's important. I too enjoy Mr. Lama's presentations, but I will take the approach of Mr. Lama and I agree more often than not. We may say the same thing differently, though. And if I could just address the reduction of size. Jeff Applebaum, truly a professional in his own right. You've often heard me talk about programming of space and why it's so important to be responsible to current needs and future needs. That is one of the main reasons why we're looking at doing that. Again, due diligence, getting a scope of exactly what is truly needed. So to your point, I believe that is well taken. And the other issue, I did make some other notes, but the other key one is the population of Lake County. The population of Lake County and the demographics of our jail do not necessarily track. We do have a number of people from out of county who come to Lake County to commit crimes. And as we all know, our Prosecutor Colson, he is a true defender of the people's interests. So I have to say that there are a number of people who are in the Lake County Jail who are not Lake County residents. So those are just two things I wanted to touch on. And for that, I say thank you. Moving back to legal's point, I truly apologize for forgetting to ask our clerk to do a roll call, and thank you for catching that, because boy, that would have been a bit of an oops. So, Madam Clerk, roll call on the motion and second regarding the adoption of our meeting minutes as indicated, waiving reading thereof.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes. Thank you. And if there's no other public comments, quickly scanning the room. Okay, moving on to our resolutions. First agenda item, please.
In the Utilities Department, resolution approving plan specifications and estimates of cost in the amount of $725,620.50 for Hewlett and Jennison Waterline Replacement Project number 434W and advertising for bids for the same, bid opening October 13th, 2021.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Gary, do you want to add something? You look like you're going for the microphone. So.
No, I was just getting prepared. But I can speak to any of the topics if you want to move forward. That's also acceptable.
Anything you'd like from Gary on this one?
I guess I would just ask, in general, have we been successful in finding labor and bids for our projects? I know that's becoming increasingly challenging. We've heard that from our engineer's office. How are we doing in that department?
Yeah, we're still seeing pretty good interest from a bidding perspective. Certainly going into winter, we anticipate there probably will be even more interest in our capital projects. So we're not seeing any problems in terms of bidding. Most of our problems, and I'll discuss in our report later, not even on capital projects, is getting the materials to build the project.
Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Young, anything?
No, we're all set.
Thank you, sir.
Well done.
Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution approving plan specifications and estimates of cost in the amount of $59,631 for sanitary sewers for Pebble Brook Estates subdivision in the village of Grand River, job number 21-21.
Move to approve?
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution approving plans, specifications, and estimates of cost in the amount of $120,052.57 for sanitary sewers for Booth Farm subdivision in Perry Village, job number 21-12.
Move to approve.
Second?
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution approving plans, specifications, and estimates of cost in the amount of $92,807 for a water line for Booth Farm subdivision in Perry Village, job number 21-11.
Move to approve?
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution approving change order number 1 with Express Underground for Deerfield Relief Sewer Phase 2 Improvement Project 366S, increasing the total contract amount by $67,295.78.
Move to approve.
Second?
Discussion? Gary, did you want to give us a little background on that one?
Sure, Commissioner. Again, this was a capital project. We're wrapping up the project, and what we discussed is closing out the construction portion of it. There was some additional cost, and as I was alluding to recently, most of this additional cost is due to material price escalation after the contract was awarded. So we had some price increases, and that resulted in also a little bit of a project delay, but we were able to complete the project with some additional causes identified in this paperwork.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else, gentlemen? Very good. Thank you. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution transferring an appropriation in Lake County Department of Utilities Sewer Operating Fund.
Move to approve?
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution authorizing execution of an engineering agreement with CT Consultants for the Arcola Creek Bennett Road Sewage Improvement Project 454S for the Lake County Department of Utilities.
Move to approve.
Second?
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution certifying unpaid water sums and administrative charges to the Lake County Auditor.
Move to approve?
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution certifying unpaid water and sewer sums and administrative charges to the Lake County Auditor.
Move to approve.
Second?
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
In Job and Family Services Department, resolution authorizing the execution of a workforce subgrant agreement between the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services and Local Workforce Development Area 5 and the Board of Lake County Commissioners.
Move to approve?
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution approving the Lake County Department of Job and Family Services vouchers, date of warrant September 24th, 2021, in the amount of $568,761.84.
Move to approve.
Second?
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
In the Commissioner's Office, resolution approving plans and specifications and authorizing advertising for bids for the Paradise Road Drainage Improvements Project 2021 in Painesville Township, Ohio, bid opening October 6, 2021.
Move to approve?
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution reappointing Timothy A. Miller to the position of Director of the Lake County Stormwater Management Department effective October 4th, 2021.
Move to approve.
Second?
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution establishing rules for the orderly presentation of public comment during the Lake County Commissioner meetings.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion?
Mr. President, this resolution comes out of several public discussions we've had in these meetings where we've recognized the need to make sure that our department heads have the opportunity to present on all of the legislation that we discuss. It's unfortunate, even if the commissioners understand why the Department of Utilities is asking for $500,000 to lay a line in Painesville Township or in Willoughby, but the public doesn't have the opportunity to hear that explanation. And if a public portion goes for 3 or 4 hours, realistically, our department heads from Job and Family Services, the county engineer, Department of Utilities, they have significant responsibilities that they have to leave to attend to. And that means that the public doesn't have the opportunity to ask questions and hear from those department heads. Nonetheless, we recognize that you might need a long time to have a thorough discussion with your commissioners and really explain your concern with what we're voting for and on. And so we don't want to limit public portion either. So the compromise that our clerk was able to draft for us with our input is to limit the first public portion to 5 minutes per person, still giving people an opportunity to comment on resolutions before they're voted on, but have a no time limit, an unlimited public portion at the end. That way, if there's a long presentation, there's still the opportunity to have that conversation with the commissioners, but it doesn't tie up the department heads that the taxpayers are paying for. No matter how much we might want everyone to be sitting here, it is an expense for the prosecutor's office, the engineer, the Department of Utilities to have employees sitting here listening to a discussion that really might only be relevant to the commissioners. No more money will be spent, whether this meeting goes for 1 hour or 30 hours if the commissioners are sitting here. But if we have, the president's like, oh no. But if we have the county prosecutor's office, I mean, we know how much the billable hour of a lawyer is worth. It doesn't necessarily make sense to hold our chief assistant prosecutor for the civil division here for a discussion on a political issue. But I think that this gives us a balance where everyone will have an opportunity to speak to the legislation before it's voted on and to the department heads if there's something relevant to them for 5 minutes. But if someone has a longer point to make, I'm happy to sit here for 3 hours, 10 hours, whatever it takes to hash it out. I just don't want to spend taxpayer dollars on the employees who are being paid by the hour, and that does cost the county to have them stuck in a discussion they may not even be a part of. So I hope that this public portion policy, this little amendment, will give people more access to public portion and more access to their department heads without the accompanying expense.
Very good. Any further discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
In the Finance Department, resolution approving payment of bills as listed on the Commissioner's Approval Journal in the amount of $3,491,752.75.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution approving purchase orders as listed on the Commissioner's Purchase Order Approval Journal in the amount of $1,003,471.01.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution increasing appropriations of various general and non-general fund accounts.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes.
Resolution transferring cash and appropriations within various general and non-general fund accounts.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes. Okay, this brings us to our Departmental Reports portion of our meeting. Utilities.
Yes, I do have a report today. I'm going to step outside the topic of capital projects this week and go more in the business environment, more in terms of the business operations, and talk about that perspective a little bit, and realizing we're operating 3 different companies: water, sewer and landfill, as you're aware, and talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we're facing over the past couple months. Before I get into that, I just want to say that we always budget cost escalation into our annual budgets from an operating perspective. We try to do that as accurate as we can, especially given the pandemic environment that we've been in, doing our best guesses as to what the price increases may have been. But I'm going to talk about some of the challenges in terms of pricing that we are still facing. Don't take my report as a crisis or alarm or panic. That's not the point of my discussion. It's mainly to emphasize that we still are operating adequately at a high performance, but we're certainly in a tough, challenging environment. We're navigating that as best we can, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the examples that I've written down, I'll try to be somewhat brief, but chemicals that we use in treatment plants continue to increase. We're dealing with that as best we can. I'll talk about at the end some of the strategies that we're already implementing. I'm going to talk first about the price escalation. As you're aware, fuel costs are still pretty high. We have limited availability of a lot of different things in terms of materials. Repair parts are mostly available, but some of them are on back order. Some of them are long lead times. So again, this is the business environment. It has nothing to do with what we've said in the past or what I've said earlier today about the capital projects. We put on a lot of free events for the customers, for the community, but it's still an expense to the utility department. Examples of that are the TV collections, the tire recycling. Again, we continue to see pricing increase, and we budgeted for some of that, so it's not a big deal. We're trying to manage the costs of recycling at the landfill. We've recently changed vendors in an attempt to try to provide the same service and reduce costs. Obviously, if you heard in the industry of automobiles, trying to purchase vehicle, there's limited selections there. Some of our heavy equipment that we've ordered a long time ago is still not assembled and still in process somewhere. And these are all things that we can deal with. These are not the end of the world, they're just challenges. So you would ask, what are we doing? What's the strategies, techniques that utilities using? I'll go through some of those and then just wrap up from there. But obviously we're sourcing pricing from various vendors, looking for other vendors that may be able to have that product or have a better price for us. Naturally, we're using our contingency funds that we always have on account. We're using some of our reserve funds as appropriately as we can, or you might want to say those are our rainy day funds, but it is what it is. We have to dip into some of those reserves. We're ordering as much material as we can to keep stock in service and keep it on our shelves as much as we can. We're working with other utilities, other communities, other contractors that might have the materials that we need, or can we exchange materials with them because they have the product that we need for that particular month. We're sharing resources between the three departments. If water has what sewer needs, we just kind of exchange parts, so we're partnering internally before we even have to go externally. We've been trying to lock in long-term pricing. I know Randy's talked about some of the pricing on capital projects, but we're experiencing the same thing, and we're trying to lock in pricing as long as we can so that we have a fixed number. And obviously looking at other alternatives that are still equal and not reducing quality, we'll try to look into some of those things to get the same type of materials. So in conclusion, I mean, we're still going to maintain a high level of service. We're still going to provide the same treatment that we always have, but we're going to have to make a little bit more financial investment. We're prepared to do that, but we'll do that, as I've said in the past, efficiently and prudently, and we'll try for the 22 budget to predict as best we can some of these cost escalations, and the ones that we missed the mark on, we'll deal with like we normally do internally with our own finances, and that's kind of the long and short of it. But any comments from there? Otherwise, I'll wrap up.
No, that sounds like best business practices being employed. So for that, I personally say thank you. Commissioner Young, Commissioner Plechnik.
We just thank you, and we continue to monitor the budget to make sure that you will have what you need to make sure that there's water in the tap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing further, moving on to Job and Family Services. Suzanne.
Good morning, Commissioners. As you know, Job and Family Services owns and operates the Kaylee Receiving Home, which provides temporary housing to children in our community who have been adjudicated, abused, neglected, or dependent. And a couple of years ago, a decision was made to pursue accreditation of the Kaylee receiving home. So it has been quite a long process. The previous director, Matt Badiato, was very involved in that. And some good news to share is we have finally received the survey dates that CARF will be coming out to survey the Kaylee home, and hopefully we will meet accreditation standards. It's a huge accomplishment to have gotten this far. On the work, all of the work that our staff has done has been tremendous. So we are looking forward to mid-October and having the folks from CARF come out to survey the Kaylee home.
Awesome. Very good. See, we're tying up all kinds of stuff here. I love it when you get closures, so that's a good thing. Commissioner Young, Commissioner Plechnik, anything? Very good. Ma'am, thank you so much as always. Okay, moving on to County Administrator Jason Boyd.
Good morning, Commissioners. Welcome back, Commissioner Young. Hope you had a nice vacation. Just real quick, I know Commissioners Plechnik and Hamercheck attended the annual NOACA meeting last Friday, as did I. I know Commissioner Hamercheck likes to talk about how we lead Lake County in multiple disciplines, and I noted from the back, because I'm not a VIP like the commissioners who sat up front, numerous slides in the Executive Director's annual presentation about projects in Lake County and Mentor and some of our more rural areas. So once again, in NOACA's world, which is the 5-county planning area that brings in a tremendous amount of federal highway dollars, Lake County stuck out tremendously to me. And I know with Commissioner Hamercheck's seat on the board, we're going to continue to move projects down the line. So I wanted to note that as a citizen, I guess from my perspective, it was really nice to see. Secondly, they had the FTA administrator under President Biden there to speak, and at the end they did a Q&A, which was actually facilitated by our own Lake Tran Executive Director Ben Capel and Grace Galucci. So Ben Capel had a shining light for Lake County as far as our transit agency is concerned, so thanks to him on that. Secondly, my weekly, I suppose, ARPA guidance, American Recovery Act. Recent publication, you guys continue to ask me, and deservedly so, when are the rules going to be out? When are the rules going to be out? NACO's publication on Monday said late fall, but use the interim guidance as your guidance right now. We had an ad hoc meeting of our planning, our ARPA panel meeting this morning. We'll have our first official meeting probably in 2 weeks. I just have a hard time. There are some projects that we'll bring to you in the near term. The mobile vaccine bus from Lake Health, our housing program, those are clear winners and eligible. I'm going to have a hard time with guidance from council on bringing projects to you knowing that we still don't have final rules, even though NACO and Treasury says go ahead and proceed under the interim rules, and we'll let you know when final ones come out. There is a provision that says they're not going to do a clawback if you misinterpret. I just don't want to put us in that particular position for some projects, regarding construction. I know we have some big economic development needs. Once again, that's still very gray. There's 1,200 questions pending in Treasury right now that have come from throughout the United States, some from me, some from CCAO. So I'm imagining late fall is probably an ambitious timeline to get the guidance. But nonetheless, next week our advisory panel, which will make recommendations to the commissioners. If you recall, on August 26th, we passed that resolution, which is Chief Deputy Auditor, County Finance Director, and Rhea Benton from Community and Planning Development will be the ad hoc committee that will review projects eligibility. The prosecutor's office will serve as legal counsel, and I am essentially staff to that panel. So we will meet on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. But just want to give you that update that it's still a bit in limbo as far as the final rules are concerned. I think that's all I have.
Just a little more detail on the no clawback. That's assuming good faith is being exercised.
Correct. Yeah, and I hope you guys know your staff well enough that we would never, as I said, we'll present a couple projects in the next week or two that are 100% eligible. I would never. And I don't think Mr. Hackman would let us bring something to you that was in the gray. It's not worth it at this point. And as you know, we have until December 31st of 2024 to obligate these dollars. And we have an additional 2 years to expend those dollars into 2026. So.
Fair enough. Just wanted to be abundantly clear that this is not a blank check to just be.
No, correct. And we've got a lot of priorities, workforce. We obviously have some capital needs here in the county. I've met with Randy on some big utility projects, travel and tourism. We've got a lot of good things. We just need to be 100% certain that we're in good order to make recommendations to the board. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, sir. Anything for our administrator? No? Okay. Thank you, Jason.
Yep.
All right, moving on. Madam Clerk.
Yes, I wanted to mention that our next regular commissioners meeting is going to be next Thursday, September 23rd at 10 a.m.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. And legal.
No reports, Commissioner.
And while I have you, though, I think this is more of a legal question than an old business question. I believe you've had benefit of reviewing the most recent Painesville Township Trustees Board meeting. There were a number of concerns expressed regarding our Sheriff's Department and the commitment of the Board of Commissioners towards Sheriff's activities within the townships. I think of particular concern, there was a reference by Trustee Chuck Hillier to their legal counsel having a brief, and there was some discussion about what is the definition of keeping the peace. I think it's appropriate that there seems to be I'm going to call it a muddying, my word. I know that's probably not a legal term, but there's this muddying of a 911 call is not necessarily an emergency call. And that, you know, the sheriff has an obligation to respond to emergencies. Could you maybe shed some light on that briefly, please?
Yes, I can. I can't speak to the muddying portion. I can tell you what the law is.
Thank you.
And the law under Title III, as it applies to Sheriff Liam Bruno and all sheriffs in the state of Ohio, is that they maintain, or rather preserve, the public peace. And that law has been on the books for a number of years. It's been litigated, not extensively, but quite frankly, it has been litigated in our Court of Appeals that Lake County is part of, the 11th District Court of Appeals, and it came out of Geauga County. And other cases have been litigated as well, not within our district, but all the cases seem to cite back to an Ohio Supreme Court from the 1930s. And specifically, that Supreme Court case says that the sheriff is not required to patrol the county and ferret out crime and act as a detective. What the sheriff has to do, though, is preserve or maintain the public peace. What does that mean? Respond to emergency calls, things like that. Act upon crimes committed within their sight. With regard to a 911 call, there's no requirement the sheriff respond to a 911 call. That can be a little bit, there's interpretation to that. Some people, as we all know, have received 911 calls are made in cases that are not emergencies. My neighbor threw a beer can on my front lawn. I need you here right now. That's not an emergency. Sheriff does not have to respond to that. Whereas someone calls in and says, someone's breaking into my back door. That's an emergency, and the sheriff's going to respond to that. So that is the status of the law. That's been in the statutes for a number of years. And the duty of the sheriff is also bolstered by the fact that in the township portion of the statutes, there's a statute that allows the township to contract with a law enforcement agency, i.e. sheriff, to provide patrol to a township. That is out there. That is present. It's been on the books for a number of years. Conversely, there's a statute under Title III for the sheriff's authority, and the sheriff is allowed to contract with political subdivisions for extra police protection. So that is the status of the law, but those two separate statutes do bolster the fact that the sheriff is not a detective per se under that one narrowly interpreted statute. Can extra protection be added? Yes, if the township or the sheriff want to enter into a contract. I don't know if that...
No, I think you hit the key elements relative to that discussion. And speaking very broadly, there were a number of statements made during the Township Trustees meeting that the sheriff and the Board of Commissioners are not in compliance with the revised code, and that there is court precedent to indicate that we are not in conformity or compliance. I know at previous meetings I've asked you point blank, is the sheriff in compliance with all controlling law? Is the Board of Commissioners in compliance? If you care to answer that for me.
Commissioner, first and foremost, absolutely, Sheriff Liam Bruno is in full compliance with his duties under the revised code. No question about it.
Thank you.
And the case law that I referred to is the only case law out there. I'm unaware of any contrary case law. In fact, I would go so far as to say it does not exist. If the law director wants to approach me, I'd be glad to sit down with him. It won't change my opinion.
Understood. And I would think that in the interests of the public good, it might not be a bad idea to reach out to Prosecutor Colson, Sheriff Liam Bruno, perhaps invite them to a commissioner meeting, perhaps our next meeting, and just discuss this in a little bit more detail. I know years ago, Prosecutor Colson did a memo for the Board of Commissioners at the time. I know that Prosecutor Colson has reviewed that same memo, and none of the facts have changed. So it might not be a bad idea to have that discussion.
I don't disagree with that at all, Commissioner, and it should be obvious, but anytime I say anything with regard to policy or stating what we think, what the law is, it's Chuck Colson's opinion as well. I don't say anything up here without Mr. Colson having discussed it with him, number one, and being in full agreement with it, number two.
Excellent, sir. Excellent. Thank you.
I agree with, if the prosecutor is open to such a discussion, I agree. Bringing him in to discuss it in our meeting would be beneficial to all.
I will alert Mr. Colson to that request.
Thank you, sir. And I believe we have it. Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, I would just add that there are two dimensions to this issue of policing in the townships. The first is the law, and that's obviously very critical because everyone needs to meet their legal obligations under the Ohio Revised Code. And we have precedent from the Ohio Supreme Court, precedent from our resident District Court of Appeals, the 11th District, all of which confirm our county prosecutor's legal opinion that the sheriff is absolutely in compliance with the Ohio Revised Code in terms of keeping the peace throughout the county, including the townships. So in terms of the legal issue, we have not seen any contrary legal opinions to the statement that our county prosecutor has made that our sheriff is in fact in compliance, and I share that opinion. I believe that our sheriff is meeting, in fact, I would say he's exceeding his obligations under the Ohio Revised Code pretty substantially. So that takes us to the second issue of fairness, which hopefully is where we can decide most issues. We have to make sure we're in compliance in the law, but we want to be fair to every taxpayer. And I don't think you have to be a lawyer or a judge, a policeman or a prosecutor to agree that every community should pay for its own policing. Stated in the alternative, I don't think you have to be King Solomon to realize it's unfair to say that folks in Willoughby Hills should pay for police in Painesville Township, or folks in Madison Township should be forced to pay for people in Perry Township. Ultimately, we all bear the responsibility for paying the bill, and in Willoughby Hills, I pay taxes for my police. In Painesville Township, they pay taxes for theirs, and that's as it should be. So when I hear the argument from a non-lawyer, I found a loophole in the law that even though it's unfair, I found a way to force the cities and villages to pay for my police. I'm a little concerned because not only does it contradict the legal opinion we've received from our county prosecutor's office, what the Ohio Supreme Court, what the Ohio 11th District Court of Appeals have said, just fundamentally it's unfair. And I have no doubt that the same folks who have made the rather remarkable request that the cities and villages pay for their policing, if Waite Hill or Willoughby Hills were to come and say, hey, Madison Township, please pay for my police, I'm sure that township would object. But I want to highlight Madison Township because I've heard them criticized by some other elected officials that they were foolish to pay for their policing and their police department because there's a loophole where they can get the cities and villages where Mentor and Willoughby Hills will pay for it. I really want to acknowledge Madison Township. They've been active in looking at the needs of law enforcement and what their community wants in terms of safety, and they've established their own police department, and they've raised the money and the revenue to pay for that. I think Madison Township should be praised. I don't think they should be criticized for being proactive and recognizing that safety is an important concern. So I really want to defend Madison Township for standing up, supporting their law enforcement, and making sure their community is safe, just as we've praised Perry Township for taking advantage of the COPS grant that the county's provided. I also want to note that there's nothing in the Ohio Revised Code that requires the clerk of courts to run her office so efficiently that she can refund hundreds of thousands of dollars to the county general fund, which allowed us to create this program to help townships that are struggling to find the resources to hire more sheriffs, more police to keep themselves safer. There's nothing in the law that requires that, but our clerk of courts, our county commission, our sheriff, our county prosecutor's office, all of whom worked on the COPS grant program, they really went above and beyond. There was no legal requirement to do it, but when we heard the concerns from Painesville Township, from Concord Township, we said we're going to step up. We're going to do more than the law requires so we can build a bridge to the future and help them to fund that policing need. Now, obviously, we can't do that forever because that would essentially be a subsidy from the cities and villages, and that wouldn't be fair to them. But to help a township to find the time to raise the revenue, to save the money, to cut expenses, whatever needs to be done to meet their policing needs, I really think the county stepped up in an enormous way. And I don't want to take away from that because someone thought they found a loophole in the law and they're disappointed when they find out that there isn't a loophole. I don't want to take away from the extraordinary effort that was put in and the achievement of the COPS grant program, which is a real aid to our townships and that Perry Township has already taken advantage of. So I hope that with the help of our county prosecutor, we've done a good job today of clarifying that the law is not only satisfied, we've gone well beyond it. The question is what's fair, and I don't think that any township trustee would stand at that microphone and say that they're willing to pay for the policing in Willoughby or Willoughby Hills or Mentor, so they can't reasonably expect that those cities would pay for the policing in their community. We're each responsible for paying for our own police, our own deputies, and as municipalities with home rule, you have an enormous amount of freedom of choice as to how you provide for that. Do you want your own police department like Madison Township? Do you want a contract with the county like Perry Township? That's up to your township trustees, your city council people, your mayors to make the best choice for your community. But it is their decision. I'm not a township trustee. I used to be a councilman. I'm not anymore. I don't have home rule. It's not my choice to decide police department versus contract with sheriff. But that's really where the meaningful conversation has to come. And I want to say I do agree with the Painesville Township trustees that they do not have sufficient policing. I share the sheriff's position. They need more deputy sheriffs in Painesville Township. But we know, based on the law, based on equity, it's absolutely a local decision that has to be made. And I would encourage them to, in their public meetings, spend their focus not on looking to other government entities to pass the buck. The home rule is real. It's in the Ohio Constitution. It is 100% their decision. But as Uncle Ben said in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. When you have the authority to decide how to pay for your police and whether to have your own department versus contracting with a sheriff, the buck also stops with you. You're responsible for that decision. And it's not helpful to the taxpayer to pretend that it's really the President of the United States or the county commission or the governor of Ohio that makes those decisions. Nope, it's the individual city, village, or township that has to decide how much police you have and how you pay for it. And I respect that. I am not a township trustee. I don't decide for Painesville or Madison. They decide. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Okay, if there's nothing further legal, we're good. Moving on to old business. Do we have any old business to discuss? Okay, I'll just thank Jason for his references to NOACA. I do believe that Lake County has in recent years been a very prominent player and influence, and I think the fact that so many resources are coming our way, when you have the Secretary of Transportation expressing an interest in what a bunch of conservatives are working on, well, I guess that's got your attention because we're doing something that's for the good of the people and it's not political in nature. So I take that as praise and an indication of a job well done. If I could, I would like to discuss, I was invited to the September 13th, the Freedom Flag ceremony that was held at Broadmoor School. I was honored to be asked to be one of the speakers, and Broadmoor School has been chosen as the first school in Ohio to display a piece of the classroom steel from Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. And more importantly, the Freedom Flag has been selected as the national symbol of remembrance for September 11th of 2001. And Broadmoor is proud to support this effort to educate current and future generations of kindergarten through 12th grade students so that they never forget. The overwhelming topic of discussion centered on not rewriting history, civility, and just being open, considerate. But something that really struck me, there was a young lady, her name is, and I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, so I just want to get that up front, Tanisha Carlgan. She is Miss Amazing Ohio Senior 2021. She sang the national anthem. She was present for this, but she was kind enough to give me a autographed photograph and recognition of her position as Miss Amazing Ohio. But I think it's very telling how she signed it with her name, and she has here, just be kind, with a little heart. You know, advice from someone so young, something we might want to consider. So with that, if there's no other old business.
Mr. President?
Sir.
Just following off your experience, I had the opportunity to attend, to participate in a few ceremonies on 9/11 as well, and I just want to acknowledge some of the folks who worked so hard to put them together. Here in Painesville City, right on the square in Veterans Park, Gary and Sue Betley every year work to have a 9/11 memorial. You were there as well. But they actually save almost 3,000 flags that they bring out every year, and that anyone who comes has the opportunity to plant in the ground to remember each of the lives lost on September 11th. So it's not just a speech, it's not just a ceremony, it's an opportunity for everyone to plant a flag and to reflect that that represents a life that was lost. And I know that Gary and Sue do this on their own. They work very hard with a few volunteers. So to everyone who helped them, and to them in particular, I know that Painesville City and the whole county are very grateful for that hard work on their part. A little later in the morning, I was able to join Mayor Morley, who's with us today, in Eastlake at the Boulevard of 500 Flags. Always has a very solemn memorial to remember 9/11 and the lives that were lost, and we're certainly grateful for that tradition being continued. Our former captain of dispatch, Mike Warner, also held an event for September 11th with a focus on veterans in Geauga County in Middlefield, hosted in the parking lot of the business of a former Willoughby Hills police officer, current Geauga County Commissioner Ralph Spitaleri. So Commissioner Spitaleri, who's also the Deputy Sheriff of Portage County, former Willoughby Hills police officer, and Captain Warner, they worked hard together to have a very solemn event with a special focus on veterans as well. And once again, all these folks do this as volunteers. They do this just for the community so that we can come together to remember. So to me, it was very significant. And many of us ended the evening. Mr. President, you were there as well at the Nowacki Foundation's annual gala in memorial of Andy Nowacki, who gave his life for our country, for whom the Grand River Post Office has now been named. And we were joined, of all people, by Cleveland native Drew Carey, who came out to show his support for Andy Nowacki's foundation, which raises money for first responders to make sure that we have a new generation of firefighters and police officers who share that giving, that selfless philosophy of Andy Nowacki himself. So it was a long day with a lot to remember, but I'm grateful that Lake County, in particular, never forgets.
Well said. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Young, anything?
No, not at this point.
Thank you, sir. Okay, moving on to new business. Do we have any new business to come before the board? None being heard? Okay, this brings us to our second public comment portion. Do we have anyone wishing to address the board in the second section? Mr. Lyman?
Good morning, Commissioners. Still morning.
Still morning.
Great. Dave Lima, 7774 Litchfield Drive. A couple of comments. I also appreciate the civil dialogue that we've had in the past and that we're having now and that we'll undoubtedly have in the future.
Thanks.
And also that I wholeheartedly support the amended rules about public comment. I think limiting the first comment to 5 minutes is the way to go. Also, I was interested to hear about the Cayley home and its attempt to be certified. Just for your information, I was conducting group therapy programs at the Cayley home from 1966 to 1968 as a member of the staff of the Lake County Mental Health Clinic. And it was a great experience for me, and I'm glad to hear that things are progressing. I'm also a member of the Cuyahoga County Mental Health Response Advisory Committee that is looking at diversionary programs for individuals who come in contact with the police. And in that, the work that we've done, we've evaluated the 9/11 calls that come in to Cuyahoga County, and approximately 60% of those calls are non-police related. So it's a significant number. Now for my comments. So I would like to summarize the views of the Lake County Jail Coalition Action Team and have them entered into the public record. I'm representing the views of this group. And these are summaries, so they're not extensive, and there are 11 points that I'm going to make. Yes?
For benefit, who is this group again?
The Lake County Jail Coalition Action Team.
I'm not familiar with.
Well, it's a group that I've organized.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at, like, did I miss a meeting somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not, we're not a 501c3 or any other structured organization. We're just a group of concerned citizens.
Okay, there's just so many
Yeah.
boards and commissions, and I'm thinking.
I thought that was a good name, though.
Oh,
The Lake County Jail Coalition Action
You
Team.
got my undivided attention.
Yeah, right.
I have to concede on that one.
All right. So first and foremost, any huge construction project for the jail should be voted on by the public, as is being done in Ashtabula County. The construction will be paid by us, the taxpayers, regardless of whether it's funded by county bonds, internal millage, or external millage. Second, an expensive new jail, especially one with even more beds, is not warranted, nor can the county reasonably afford it unless you impose an additional tax on residents or decrease existing services. Third, the Ohio ODRC annual jail inspections have indicated the jail is safe and not a threat to the public or those housed in the jail. A new jail will not measurably change the outcome of annual inspections. A similar result can be achieved through a renovated jail. Your own consultant reports show that a renovated jail could sustain the jail with similar inspection results without jeopardizing safety for decades at a significantly lower cost to taxpayers. Fourth, the financial obligations incurred when building a new jail could have a significant impact on the county's future funding ability with potential additional future taxpayer liability. Fifth, a new jail would have similar obsolescence issues to a renovated jail. When renovated properly, there is little distinction between renovated or new when it comes to obsolescence. Sixth, the average stay in the jail is less than 30 days. It is not reasonable to expect a new facility that the length of stay will change, and therefore a new jail would not substantially change the level of care for mental health and substance abuse when compared to a renovated jail. In fact, only 1,359 square feet is allotted to the jail treatment programs in the proposed new jail consultant report. Seventh, there is a little basis for the need for additional beds considering the last 10 years, the average jail population has stayed relatively consistent. Considering other initiatives to reduce jail populations, bail reform, diversion programs, drug legalization legislation, there is no clear evidence the jail population will increase. Eighth, a renovated jail should be able to last for decades per your consultant reports. Electrical and mechanical upgrades as well as structural corrective maintenance could be addressed during the renovation. The jail physical structure is capable in its design to last for decades. Costs related to temporary housing for inmates during renovation could be mitigated by completing renovation as proposed over a 10-year period of time. Ninth, the high cost frequency of preventive and corrective maintenance such as cell locks would justify replacement rather than the continued high cost of maintenance. This could be addressed in a renovated jail and not compelling enough to justify a new jail. 10th, additional use of remote court appearances in the jail can be accommodated through upgrades in the existing jail. This could be addressed in a renovated jail to achieve similar capability as a new jail using existing rooms such as the library. And 11th and finally, any proposal for a new renovated jail should go to the taxpayers in a ballot measure. We believe the size of such an expenditure requires it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I know there's been a lot of talk about renovation. Really, I refer to it as a refit because of the simple renovation that we may be saying the same thing. So I'll just assume that. But all of our discussions in regards to a refit or renovation, every one of those discussions talked about an addition to the facility. So we'd have additional program space, so we'd have some place to move those in the building. It's a little bit like doing heart surgery on someone and expecting them to be going to work. You can't do major surgery on this building and have it be an occupied space. So that's problematic and probably beyond the scope of this simple discussion, but discussion is warranted. I'm just checking off it because it's also items 3 and 8 talk about renovation. The jail reports. The state of Ohio, I believe the gentleman's name was John Adams, made it abundantly clear on 2 separate occasions that the jail reports are not an affirmation or any kind of a recommendation that the existing facility itself is adequate. When they talk about a jail report, they're talking about operations, procedures, the conduct of the staff and their interactions with the inmates. It's not a commentary on the facility itself unless the facility itself is posing an imminent hazard. So those are very important points to talk about. I believe it was item 5, obsolescence versus new, no difference. I think it's time that we enter into the discussion, the fact, when I refer to this building as being obsolete the day we took possession of it, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I had the advantage of being an employee of the county in the telecommunications department, one of the people charged with finishing the jail, because the contractor of the time had done such a terrible job of fitting that building out, constructing it, designing it. It's almost, I actually just chuckled, it's almost laughable, because back in the day I remember talking with my boss at the time, Paul Stefanko. He's still the current director of the telecommunications department, and we were, how guys talk on a job site. It's like, boy, I don't want to be one of those commissioners when they have to deal with this. Be careful what you say. And I remember Paul saying something about the designers must have oatmeal between their ears or something to that effect. And we talked about the building being a turkey, and yes, that was a common term to use back then when you were talking about an albatross or a white elephant. The contractor that built that jail, I think it's fair to say, the reason we're taking, and I personally am pushing so hard to have all these checks and balances in place, why we're having open conversations at commissioner meetings now, those checks and balances didn't exist. That contractor, there were indictments at other facilities. There was no significant, the oversight was in name only. It was grossly mismanaged at all levels, poorly designed, poorly constructed. The maintenance that was associated with it was lacking, to say the least. I dare say if we were to go back and look at that through the benefit of history, if we were going to be honest, there's some people should have gone to jail for that. And some people did at other facilities. There was a lawsuit in another county, I want to say Jefferson County perhaps. There was a $13 million settlement that wound up bankrupting the company. There were other facilities, not necessarily jails, but similar facilities, endless maintenance problems, endless construction problems, not meeting design criteria. And you hear that conversation a great deal about design criteria. What are you getting? The county at the time bought an Edsel. You can't take an Edsel and turn it into a Ferrari. It's not going to happen. And we don't need a Ferrari. Anybody who wants to go to that extreme, well, they're just thinking pie in the sky. We need nuts and bolts. You've heard me talk about Continuum of Care. If somebody's having problems outside, they do something that has an interaction with law enforcement, they wind up in the jail for 30 days. They can't have that break. It's a disservice to them. It's also a disservice to our community. Recidivism is a very real problem. And the current facility was designed wholly around an incarceration model. And there was no consideration for ADA. There was no consideration for future programming of spaces, no flexibility. It's a very rigid building. I like to say it's built like a battleship, and that's good and bad. The bones are solid, but the systems and subsystems and how you would implement those actions, again, beyond the scope of having a simple discussion here, but there are some real problems. And I dare say there were some political problems that were overlooked back in the day. I'm not going to offer that as a criticism of our predecessors, but that needs to be entered into the dialogue. The checks and balances that we are doing today, and I'm speaking for myself, I hope my colleagues would support this, we can never allow that to happen again. We can't have a Board of Commissioners in 20, 30 years. And I say 20, 30 years because this replacement has been being talked about for at least 10 years. And that's a pretty tough nut to crack. When you've got a building that was supposed to be a 40-year structure, and at the 20-year mark, people are saying, hey, this isn't going to work. At the 30-year mark, it's like, wow, I can't believe we made it this far. And we have been making significant investments, significant improvements. But again, it's all very important. And again, if I could go back to your earlier discussion about I'm going to say right sizing. You can say reducing, I'm going to call it right sizing. and making sure that we're actually addressing and being responsible to the current needs and future needs based on best practices and not being biased one way or the other. And I'm actually encouraged to hear that you're on that committee. I'd like to talk to you more about that. Every time I hear something new, it's because the other thing is, and if you could maybe respond, was I correct that you're also on the committee working with, I'm so sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. The mandates that the Cleveland's operating under. What would
The consent decree?
That's it, the consent decree. Am I correct? You're on that committee as well?
Well, I'm involved with the Cleveland Police Commission.
Cleveland Commission, okay.
Which is involved in the consent decree and also the charter amendment.
Okay.
That is before the people in Cleveland.
Okay, and the reason I bring that up is, so if anybody wonders why you have such precise comments, it's not just something that you're pulling off the internet. This is something that you're living. So I just want to get that into the discussion. Thank you. You hit us with a lot there, so thank you. It's all in there. Commissioner Young, Commissioner Pleshnik, anything you want to add, gentlemen?
Mr. President, I would just say that as the Board of Commissioners and the public continue to consider the needs for law enforcement going forward, I think it's very important that we operate from the same set of facts. You sometimes talk about the same chapter of the same book. And my starting point is to look at the day-to-day experience that the jail administrator and that the sheriff are having with the current building. It's very easy for us to sit here and debate how bad the jail is, but the people who are working with it on a day-to-day basis, who have to hire COs to work in that jail in a very competitive labor environment, who are seeing the experience of the inmates on a day-to-day basis, we need to start with that. Now, we can't end there. I certainly agree that we need to have more input, but that's the starting point, because our sheriff was the jail administrator, was the captain overseeing the jail for many years himself. Captain Brooks has come to share her perspective. We've heard from the 2 county agencies that maintain the jail. So when we talk about how easy it would be or how costly it would be to refit the building versus build a new one, we're not just talking about the K2M report, which the county spent about $90,000 to purchase. This was not a cheap or a periphery report. It's not a back pocket calculation. We are also talking, we've had at our meetings, the head of telecommunications, Paul Stefanko, the director of buildings and grounds, Mark Eifelis, and we've heard from them that in both of their professional opinions, maintaining that jail on literally a day-to-day basis, not off on Saturdays and Sundays, that's a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour concern, that they both believe we need a new jail and that the cost of refitting or rebuilding, they think the K2M report is drastically underestimating that cost. And once you open those walls, once you start seeing the extent of the water damage, they think we're talking about far more expense. I tend to agree. As someone who was a landlord with a few duplexes, water damage is a terrible thing, whether it's a small building or a large building, and no one debates that with the flat, leaky roof, there's been water damage for now 31 years in that structure. We've also heard from our local corrections board, which once again brings together representatives from the Adams Board, dealing with mental health funding in our county, Deepwood, helping those with disabilities to live fulfilling, meaningful lives and taking care of those needs. Our public defender, who's looking to the needs of those who have to have a stay in that jail. Our county prosecutor, who's looking to make sure that the law is enforced in an affordable way for the taxpayer as well. All those folks unanimously voted on the local corrections board that we need a new jail. Now, I'm not saying that I'm closed to other perspectives, but we need to have enormous amounts of evidence beyond simply an opinion to say the jail administrator is wrong, the sheriff is wrong, the judges are wrong, the public defender is wrong, the county prosecutor is wrong, the mental health authorities in this county are also wrong. Everybody is wrong. I mean, that's essentially the perspective that's been put forward. I respect the fact that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but I think that any reasonable trier of fact would say, you need to have a heck of a lot of evidence to say that the people running the jail today are wrong. The judges, the prosecutors, the public defenders who are administering justice in this county are wrong. I would need to see a lot of evidence to be convinced otherwise, because these are the folks who are using, who are administering, who are taking care of and fixing the facility. When we say, oh, it's easy, we can just fix it, well, the people who are doing it say, no, we can't. We're reaching the limit of what is possible. Now, I don't deny that you can rebuild anything. There are Model Ts still on the road today, but they do not run as well as a modern car, and it costs a small fortune to maintain them. We could have a jail that doesn't work as well as a modern jail, that costs a large fortune to maintain. It's possible. If a Model T can run today, this jail could go forever. But I don't think this is the historic Lake County Jail and we're going to be giving museum-style tours through it. This is a building that has a practical purpose, and I don't think we should spend $200 million to fix a jail. And I'm concerned when I hear from Buildings and Grounds that K2M report is wrong. It's going to cost a lot more to fix it. These are the people who are actually opening up the walls, fixing plumbing, dealing with broken locks on a daily basis, and they're saying, we agree with you, Mr. Lima, the jail report is not right. But no, it's not that it'll be less, it'll be a lot more. That scares me when I hear that. And the county commission is ultimately the body that's responsible. We've talked about votes of the people. I do believe in giving the people their say. And this conversation we're having now is all about that. At the same time, I don't believe in fooling people or lying to people. And saying that we can put a jail issue on the ballot is not honest. If we had a vote of the people that said don't build a new jail, and then somebody sues and said, I'm sorry, I disagree with all of you, the jail is not fine, these little band-aids you put on it are not enough, it's not ADA compliant, there's rain falling on my head, I'm not safe in this environment, you can get a court order. You can get a judgment against you just like they found in Cuyahoga County, and then you're building a new jail. Guess what? I don't think it's fair or honest to say that you can put this on the ballot, because really you can't. Well, I mean, you can put it on the ballot. We can also vote on who the most popular dog in Lake County is. I think it's Beamer. A little biased there. But there's no real legal weight to it. At the end of the day, if a court rules that a jail is necessary and that you need a new one and the Band-Aid you put on isn't enough, guess what? You're building a jail. We don't make the Ohio Revised Code. We've already heard from our county prosecutor and from the jail inspectors that the Ohio Revised Code requires that you provide incarceration facilities to deal with the people who come through the county. Not necessarily residents, as our president shared. Sometimes they're from neighboring counties or other places, but when our judges sentence someone or they're awaiting trial, we are legally obligated to provide that. So we can't put that on the ballot, or rather we can, it just would have no legal impact. And I don't want to be dishonest. I want to tell people for real, here are the things you get to choose. Now, you mentioned Ashtabula County. They are putting an issue on the ballot, but they're not putting the issue of shall we build a jail or not on the ballot, because that would be meaningless. Ultimately, a jail is required by the Ohio Revised Code. That's not something that you can meaningfully put on the ballot. They're putting on the ballot an issue of whether or not to raise their sales taxes. And I agree that if we have to have a massive tax increase, that's something we should talk about putting on the ballot. That's a real debate to be had. But we're not talking about that today. We haven't been talking about it at all, as a matter of fact. I think we're very blessed in Lake County to have a strong enough budget that if trends continue and no crises occur, and we have to qualify there, 2020 taught us from murder hornets to COVID-19, you may not know what's coming next. But assuming that we continue to have similar budgetary strength to what we have today, I believe that we can pay for this jail without a tax increase along the lines you're seeing in Ashtabula. But that's what they're putting on the ballot. I want to be very clear. Ashtabula County is not saying, we're going to try to amend the Ohio Revised Code and decide whether or not we're going to have a jail here. That's not on the ballot there. And we can't meaningfully put it on our ballot today. Sales tax increases, property tax increases, you can put on the ballot, and counties do that all the time. To our knowledge, there has never been a building put on the ballot, and the issue of whether or not we need a jail is a matter of the Ohio Revised Code. Putting it on the ballot, I think, would be deceptive to the voter, and I don't think that's right, fair, or just to pretend that they would be able to vote no, and then there wouldn't be a need for a jail, and then next week a lawsuit, a court order, and bam, there's a jail. That would be awful to do. And so I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I think it's reasonable to say if there's a sales or property tax increase, my organization wants that on the ballot. That's put on the ballot all the time. But we can't amend the Ohio Revised Code by ballot, and we have never put the issue of building a building on the ballot in the history of the county. So I want to make sure we're all talking about the same issues here and recognize that ultimately if you choose to say, I'm going to put a Band-Aid on, I'm going to put a Band-Aid on, I'm going to ignore the problem, I disagree with the sheriff, I disagree with the inmates, I disagree with the people in the jail, I think it's fine. We already know the end of that story. Cuyahoga County took that path. They did. They said, we can get by without it. We don't need to pay for so much. We don't need to have this expense. And frankly, we can't afford it. That's what they said. Then the lawsuits came. Guess what? After the lawsuits and the added expense, then they hired Jeff Applebaum. That's what they did. So we know how this story will end if we go down that road. We'll get sued. We'll end up building a jail. It'll cost a lot more because we'll have to pay settlements on top of settlements, on top of court judgments. And if someone wants to do that, that's all well and good, but I'm too cheap to pay for it. I want to do it right the first time. I want to follow the law right here and now. I want to get her done. And I'd be happy to take a vote to build a jail right now. But I recognize that it is responsible to go through the full process to make sure we know exactly what the sticker price will be, to have a conversation with the corrections board, to have a conversation with the sheriff and jail administrator, to make sure that when we say jail, we have a absolutely solid, well thought out idea of what that jail looks like. We should talk about the exact number of beds. We should talk about the layout, the plan, how we're going to address mental health issues and addiction. And so, while on the concept of do we need a new jail, I'm ready to vote yes today. But I recognize that with Mr. Applebaum's help and with input from all the stakeholders, we want to do it right. As the president said, we don't want a situation where a jail is rushed and we have a weak concept and perhaps we ignore needs. That's why we're going through a several months long process. I think we should all be happy as taxpayers when we hear that it might take 3 or 4 months for Mr. Applebaum to pull together the proposal. Then we sit down with a criterion architect, all the stakeholders, the public do, and we give input as to what's necessary. And then when we have a clear picture of the needs of the county, we vote to move forward. But I'm going to tell you right now, if someone wants to say we can put a Band-Aid on it for a small amount of money, the need of the jail is going to drop precipitously, even though over the last 50 years it's gone up markedly. If someone wants to say the sheriff is wrong, the jail administrator is wrong, building and grounds are wrong, telecommunications is wrong, the local corrections board, which includes the public defender, mental health associations, prosecutor, judges, they're all wrong. You gotta do better than, there's gotta be a better way. Show me the better way. Dollars and cents, numbers, and tell me who backs you up, who's actually working in that jail, because this is a serious issue. It can't just be about my opinion or yours. I fully concede. My opinion is not as informed as the sheriff, the judges, the prosecutor, the public defender. And that's why I trust them so deeply as part of this conversation, as we're making the right decision for the voter and the public. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Music, I believe you had an interest in speaking?
Yes.
Please, sir.
Okay.
John Music, 45 Coventry Drive. Yes, I want to thank Commissioner Hammercheck for bringing that up. I was at that township meeting and I did speak. And first of all, I want to agree that I do agree as far as the first public comment, we should be limited to 5 minutes, because basically that first section of public comment was basically about the resolutions that were on there, so you could give your opinion before it was voted on. So I agree with that. So first of all, I want to say is that I agree with Commissioner Hammercheck when he said it is not responsible. There are 23 communities in Lake County to pay for somebody's police protection. It should be up to that individual community to pay what they had to pay that wasn't covered under, in this case, and what the sheriff does or what he does not do. And I support law enforcement 100%. And the thing about, and I think they do a great job here in Lake County. But what I also want to say is that, you know, the thing about it is, as it was brought up at that meeting, because I spoke, and they said, well, you always talk about watching our tax dollars and about senior citizens. And I said, yes, I do. Anybody that's on a fixed income of any, by any way, yes, we do have to watch them. But I also brought up at that meeting, you know, there's a pamphlet they hand out, what townships do. And I went through those many times, and I said, you know, I can't see any more high priorities than police, fire, and roads. We have to do what we have to do to maintain those three services. We must. And the thing about it is, that's why I always say to you, and I'm asking you, the three of you, and I said this before, I think the department heads do a good job of spending taxpayer dollars. And I'm asking you to continue to be public servants and to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to address the board?
I'd like to just say briefly.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate our passing those new rules for orderly presentations during public comment. And I think that we're going to operate more efficiently because of those new rules. But if we're going to apply those, we should apply them. And probably starting next week, we should give you folks an opportunity to step out discreetly or whatever before we begin the second public comment, which is already stretched into almost an hour now, I believe. So I'm sure we'll have some changes made by next week in regard to that. And secondly, Dave, I'd really appreciate it if you could, you talk a lot about different models for delivering justice. And I really appreciate your comments, but I'd like to hear more about those models and how they might work in Lake County and how that might then relate to the potential envisioned population for the new jail, how large that population might be given the current scale here in Lake County. That's a foreign concept to a lot of us. You know, it's great to talk about redirecting folks before they're assigned to a cell. It's great to talk about the impact that might have on the economy, people able to go back to work again, etc., on families, having bread earners in the household. All those things sound wonderful, but how does it work? Is there a model somewhere where it has indeed worked? And how that all work together to reduce cost, improve the peace, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm talking about. So if you have those types of things and you could either relate them to us at some point or another from the podium, or I'm sure you have a lot of written information. Summaries would be helpful.
I can briefly comment on that now, or we can get together and I can provide more information.
If you want to take the microphone, I have no objection if my colleagues don't.
Well, how long would it take, Dave?
Oh, 3 or 4.
Please say minutes, not hours. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to clarify, when we say put this on the ballot, we're not asking the Lake County residents whether we should have a jail or not. Obviously, we have a jail and we'll continue to have a jail. When we say put it on the ballot, we're talking about a tax levy that would pay for it. And that's what Ashtabula County is doing. They're going to pay for a jail. If they get approval of the increase in the sales tax, then that would pay for the jail. So we're not asking them to violate the Ohio Revised Code that requires counties to have a jail. But an example, and I'll just briefly is Cuyahoga County. They have a facility called Oriana House, and the idea is
Oriana?
ORIANA. And it's a diversionary facility that police officers can directly take individuals to that facility instead of to jail, who the police officer has observed are either nonviolent, low-level issues, homelessness, mental health, substance abuse issues, and they can actually transport them there when they're involved in responding to a call. And that's one example of a diversionary program that has been established and can be used. Now, there's some controversy about that because the county prosecutor said, no, police officers can't do that without contacting us first. And that's being debated. And hopefully, police officers will have the discretion to be able to do that without the interference of the prosecutors. So that's one example.
Quick question. I'm trying to relate this to maybe some things that are going on. Would that be an example of, right now, law enforcement, sometimes they'll take a person to an emergency room or to Laurelwood. We call it pink slipping.
Right.
Would that be a facility that would be an alternate so you don't have all the costs and burdens put on the medical?
That's exactly right. That this is an alternative to the pink slipping process that gets used when a police officer encounters someone who is psychotic or having obvious issues, and they can require that person to be evaluated, admitted and evaluated. I think it's over a 3-day period of time that pink slip authorization holds. This is different. The program, for example, a lot of the staff people in programs like this are people who have had the same experience with either addiction or mental health issues and this sort of thing, homelessness. So a lot of peer counseling occurs at these facilities. And it is voluntary. Once you have to agree. We can take you to jail or we can take you to this diversionary program, and the person has some choices about it. So that's just an example of it, and I think we have to acknowledge that the development of these programs does carry a cost, and the idea is that the costs involved actually will reduce in the long term costs that are associated with continued recidivism of individuals who are part of that criminal justice revolving door, and so it's just a different way of addressing the problem of crime in our country. So I'd be happy to do some more research for other examples, but there are significant programs that have been developed in a variety of other cities and jurisdictions along these same lines.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Do you have any data on how long has that program been working in Cleveland, if I could ask?
Well, it hasn't been, Oriana House has been around for a long time, but the move, since the George Floyd situation. It is really the effort to find alternatives to the regular policing process has really come into vogue. And for example, the mental health, the Cuyahoga County Mental Health Advisory Committee, which is which the membership is all the stakeholders in Cuyahoga County, the Adams Board, the police department representatives, and so on, are all part of this effort to look at the ability to improve the diversion of people who do come in contact with the law enforcement community, but who obviously have other issues that can be addressed in a different way rather than incarceration. And I mean, we have to also acknowledge the fact that there's a significant number of people in the Cuyahoga County Jail that I'm aware of who are there because they're poor, they're homeless, they don't have the ability to make bail, and they remain incarcerated pre-trial. And that's why we're so hopeful that the bipartisan bills that have been introduced into the state legislature, in both the House and the Senate, will help to correct this issue, because judges will be given discretion and will be required to explain in writing when they decide to detain someone, rather than provide them with bail. And those reasons for detainment are that they're a flight risk and or that they're a danger to the community. And so there are efforts that are being made that we think will significantly reduce the population of individuals sent to jail.
Is this part of the unified sentencing that the Ohio Supreme Court is researching and trying to implement?
I'm not sure if it's part of that, except that it's been introduced, Senate Bill 182 and House Bill 315 have been introduced in a bipartisan, and it's also, the two bills are also have an unusually large number of co-sponsors in both parties, over 50 co-sponsors to this legislation, which almost guarantees that although it might be tweaked somewhat, it probably is going to pass. And it's also favored by the Chief Justice O'Connor that this legislation pass. So there are things happening that I think we need to be aware of, and we think will make a difference.
Dave, could you put together just a summary of what you're talking about in reference to what's happening in Cuyahoga and perhaps in other parts of the country that might be directly relatable to our situation here?
I will say yes, and
that might take some time, I know.
And I will get to it. Sure.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just again, I know we've talked about this. Judge Lucci, working with the Ohio Supreme Court, is one of the pilot courts in the state of Ohio as far as unified sentencing and the like. And again, Judge O'Donnell, again of Lake County Court of Common Pleas, was on the steering committee that established the foundation for that. So two of our Lake County judges are very truly foundational, and those practices are being employed right here in Lake County from a Supreme Court perspective.
Right. And it's interesting to note, we met with Judge Lucci as well, And of the, I think it was 1,200 cases that were considered for bail, only 40 of those were dealt with by the common police courts here in the county. And almost all of those individuals were released on personal recognizance. The explanation from the judge is that the penalty for not showing up when you're released on personal recognizance is much larger than forfeiting a small amount of money, like $250. You can get put into the clink for 180 days if you fail to show up when you've been released on personal recognizance. So the larger number of cases that where bail is set is happening at the municipal court level. We were extremely pleased to hear that the vast majority of those 40 cases were released on the basis of their personal recognizance. And more of that can happen, we think, as judges have more discretion to do so.
Very good. Thank you, sir, for all you're doing.
Mr. President?
Sir.
Just supplementing what Mr. Lima shared, I do think it's worth noting that in Lake County, we're also working as best we can to make sure we have sufficient facilities for those dealing with substance abuse and mental health issues. Just last year, then State Representative John Rogers worked with Lake Geauga Recovery Centers to get a $500,000 grant to build a new residential treatment facility for men dealing with substance abuse issues, but by building that frees up other space for women, so it's really increasing the capacity for all those in need. Our Lake County Land Bank, that Mr. Rogers is the president of, actually donated the land for that facility on Oak Street in Paynesville. So while there's always more to be done, and I'm not here to say that we've done enough, it's important to note that our county is actively taking steps to increase the number of beds that are available for people with these issues. More to do, but we are actively working to increase those services.
Very good. Okay, if there's nothing further to come before this board, do we have any other public comments? Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Discussion? None being heard. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Plechnik.
Yes.
Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammercheck.
Yes. Thank you for joining us today. This meeting stands adjourned.